This episode of Inside the Goblin Universe brought to you by Goblin Media. We bring the rabbit hole to you.
My name's John Downs. I'm the founder of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and you're listening to Inside the Goblin Universe.
Hello again, folks, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Goblin Universe. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Ronald Murphy.
I'm Bryan Bowden, the other co-host.
And we are extremely lucky and flattered to have as our guest tonight the New York Times best-selling author of such books as Meg, The Lock, and Undisclosed, a novel. The one and only Mr. Steve Alten. Steve, thank you so much for being on our program this evening.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
This is awesome. This is great.
It is. Now, at the outset, I want to ask you, and I ask anybody that I interview, whether they be an author or an investigator, how did you get started in this field? Your interest into such things as, the Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, things of that nature. What got you started?
Well, I guess what got me started was back in 1995. I I happened to read an article in Time magazine on the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of the Western Pacific, and the article talked about this unexplored gorge and hydrothermal vents, and that there was life at the bottom of the ocean that we never knew about. And when I was younger, I was a big reader about great white sharks. I guess Jaws started me off on that, and then I explored a lot of the nonfiction readings of great whites. And in any book that I'd ever read or any stories that I ever read about great whites, there was always a little blurb about the prehistoric cousin of the great white, the megalodon. And I always remembered seeing that picture of six nerdy-looking scientists sitting in a Smithsonian jaw. And I thought, it might be a feasible story to sort of knit these two things together, the hydrothermal vents and the Mariana Trench and megalodon. And so it was 1995. There was no internet back then, so I went to the library and found the picture and started reading about the shark. There wasn't a whole lot about it out there. And I just decided that, I this book. And so because a job, a job, had just over broke.
Yes.
I had to work on the book from about 10 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning and on weekends. And I set out with a little word processor on the living room table, and after about 6 months, I had a manuscript and managed to find a literary agent who believed in the project, and things. That's how my career started.
That gets the ball rolling for the most part.
Yeah, the rest is history.
That was still my biggest book deal over 20 years ago.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I think your latest is gonna really top that by far. I mean, I already have this vision of the movies, and I'm trying to figure out who the character will be and who's going to play that one. I mean, this is going to be huge, in my opinion, but I'm not in the business like that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, Steve, I mean, Meg is finally going to be brought to the big screen. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Third time's a charm. We actually had optioned the book as a movie before the book was published. And Disney's Hollywood Picture had a first look deal with it. And they had some trouble with the studio. Over the next year or two, the president of Hollywood Pictures was fired. And when a president leaves, the incoming president never takes on his predecessor's projects. So the book, the rights went into reversion. And then in 2005, New Line Cinema optioned it, and but they hired a new screenwriter who took the story into a sort of a wacky direction, and they decided not to go forward with it because of some internal problems at that studio, including they had pre-sold the foreign rights at a discount to make up for some of the movies that had not done so well for their foreign foreign.
The releases, yep.
Yeah, so the rights reverted back, and at that point, I said enough is enough, and I optioned it to a friend of mine whose name is Belle Avery. Belle is a producer who works behind the scenes and raising funds to get the movies done. And she had, in her career, she had raised about $1.3 billion worth of funding for Hollywood movies. And she loved the project and ran with it and took it to China, to Gravity Productions, and they were so kind as to put up $150 million for the project. And
wow, that's a
took
nice
it to
backing.
Warner Brothers. Yeah, for private investors, that's a lot of money.
Yes,
and they took it to Warner Brothers, and Warner wanted a piece of it. And next thing we know is Jason Statham's being attached to it, and we're off and running.
And you're off and running. Now, how much creative control do you have over a production such as that?
I have none.
None, right.
I had originally written this script that was used to finance the movie, but then other screenwriters were brought in, and and so I don't have any say at this point other than with Belle, and she's the lead producer, so she safeguards the movie.
Very nice, very nice. Right. And I'm truly looking forward to this because, again, all of your work has a very cinematic perspective to it. Whenever you read it, you can actually see the story playing out in front of you. The first time I wrote any kind of research book regarding the paranormal was about 3 years ago, and that was a book entitled On Mermaids, and I explored the idea and the notion of the mermaid as an archetype. And as I was writing this book, I kept thinking of all the details that you described in Meg about the ocean and the vastness of it and these deep trenches. That was always in the back of my mind whenever I was writing that book. So I thank you for that as well, too. That little bit of input into my artistic life.
Well, the devil's in the details, and in my books, I spend a lot of time doing research. I think it's important to get the research right, and in Undisclosed, I probably spent more time than any book.
Well, yeah, one of the things I love about your books is I think they call it science fact for the most part, or
faction.
Faction. I mean, you take your research, and it's so good and it's so accurate, and you weave this thing seamlessly into your writing. If you wouldn't know better, you would have thought this came right out of the news. You're actually a fly on the wall in every situation, and I commend you for being that diligent to the research, because some people just go out there and they don't do the research, and you can feel it, you can see it, you can feel it when you're reading it, like that's not going to happen. But with yours, I mean, it starts off day one, boom, and you're just, it's like a roller coaster ride, and you never get off it, but you're enjoying every minute of it.
Well, Undisclosed, how that came about is pretty bizarre story. Back in 2010, I was finishing up the third in the Mayan series called Phobos, Mayan Fear in the Domain series. And there was a section of the story that dealt with extraterrestrials. So in the process of researching it, I came across a 2-hour YouTube video called The Disclosure Project, which is basically an event that was held in May of 2001, hosted by Dr. Stephen M. Greer, who is considered by many to be the foremost authority on UFOs and extraterrestrials. Dr. Greer has briefed 2 sitting presidents, members of Congress, and he had accumulated testimonials from hundreds of members of the military, the intelligence agencies, defense contractors, who had come forward and told him the real stories behind these things. And so the Disclosure Project brought forward 20 witnesses who were extremely credible, all having high top secret passes and clearances. And I was so impressed by it that I contacted him and asked his permission to use excerpts from the testimonials in between chapters of the book. And he was very gracious and allowed me to do it. And when the book was done, I sent him a hardback of it, and they read it, he and his wife, And the next thing I know, I'm being contacted by the Greers, and they're stating that in December of 2013 they'll be down in Miami, and my wife and I like to go out to dinner with them. So, of course, I said, sure, absolutely. Well, 3 days, or 3 nights, I should say, before we were supposed to meet, this was on Saturday night, December 14th, at approximately 11 o'clock at night. My wife and I were coming home from dinner and a movie, and as we were driving through our neighborhood, we noticed these lights in the night sky, pale amber lights like nothing I'd ever seen before, and there were about a dozen of them moving in staggered pairs. And as they passed overhead, we could see the outline of the saucer shape on the bottom. And as we watched, they simply disappeared into the ether, one by one, not behind a cloud bank, but simply disappeared into a higher dimension. And it was unbelievable. I mean, it was like we were being treated to something very special.
Well, there was a lot of talk about with Dr. Greer that usually when most people meet him, they do have, or they're going to, or they're coming close. There's going to be an event like this in their lives that will, it coincides with Dr. Greer, which is great.
Well, that's what he told us 3 nights later. Of course, we were all excited. Guess what happened to us? And he sort of was prepared for that and said exactly what you said, that because extraterrestrials communicate through thought energy, that in a sense they were checking us out and for perhaps things to come. And what came out of that initial meeting was another dozen meetings and interviews, and basically Dr. Greer's challenge was that he was having a difficult time getting his information out to the public in the mainstream because he was totally being blacklisted and being cut off. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't I help you write your next book, and we'll get it mainstreamed into bookstores. And at the same time, if you'll let me use the information that you've acquired, I'll write a fictional story that'll be served like a Trojan horse, that it will be faction. It will be a thriller woven around the actual facts. And so we agreed to do that. And his book came out in April, called Unacknowledged, to which I edited and helped write. And my book, of course, is Undisclosed, which is a fictional thriller, but it's actually all the information in it is factual.
Oh, it's wonderful, because I am a supporter, fan of Dr. Greer's. Being in this field and not knowing who Dr. Greer is, they look at you like, who? You don't know who he is? But what I love about your book and Undisclosed is that you weave it in nicely, where you're pulling everything that you know about from Unacknowledged, and you did do a great job with that Trojan horse, because they complement each other perfectly, and you get that thrill ride, but you're also getting the facts that Dr. Greer has uncovered for years, and amazing work.
It is. It is very difficult to educate and entertain. Sometimes it's they're on such a different spectrum. It's hard to compile them into one work of one book. And you did an excellent job. And one of the things that I am interested in is the idea of misinformation, of disseminating the wrong information to kind of change people's mind. I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been around this earth enough, at 48 years of my life, to see that sometimes the government will tell you things to have its own agenda. And you allude repeatedly throughout Undisclosed about a shadow government. Now, do you feel, your own self, Mr. Steve Alten, you feel that there is that shadow government out there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because, the evidence is overwhelming. The testimonials that have come forward from people who were involved in it or are still involved in it, the presence of subterranean bases beneath our military bases, just the complete reverse engineering of these craft that were taken down from 1947 to 1956 and beyond. The technologies that are being hidden from us. It's the evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think you have to be that quote-unquote nutcase to understand this either. Whenever we look at the idea of even the military-industrial complex, that is also, a form of the shadow government. We all know that is a reality in today's world. War is business, and that's the reason why we wage war. It's making somebody money. So I think whenever we talk about conspiracies and shadow governments, people automatically write us off. Well, some people, let us put it that way. But I don't think that they should be so fast at writing off the stuff that's discussed in Undisclosed, because I really think that it makes an impact. You're making a statement about what is going on in the world today.
Yeah, and this all started back in, interstellars have been visiting our planet for, thousands of years, if not longer. But things began in earnest during World War II with the Foo Fighters, which were these energy drones that were shadowing our bombers on both sides of the war, and they investigated them, and President Roosevelt had sent General Jimmy Doolittle to investigate them in Europe, and sure enough, he came back and said, yeah, they're interplanetary in nature. And what brought these species to Earth was, basically we were like teenagers playing with gasoline and fire, which was we were testing atomic weapons at the time, and we would go on to use them in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they came because we were a threat to ourselves and the rest of the universe, and it's not a coincidence that Roswell in 1947 was the location that was buzzed by these UFOs, because Roswell at the time was the home to the 509th Bomber Squadron, which was the only wing in the world equipped with atomic weapons. So that's why Roswell was chosen. That's why Roswell was buzzed. And Roswell also had a weapon, which was a scalar weapon, which was a longitudinal wave weapon that was not limited to the speed of light. That actually travels at multiples of the speed of light. And so when at the end of June in '47, you had these sightings going on. The military activated the weapon and brought these craft down.
Well, fascinating.
That's all from reverse engineered technology for the most part. So,
well, they were able to recover these ships and more that followed, and they reverse engineered them, and over the next decade, were able to duplicate almost everything that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
So they have not only these UFOs that crashed, but they have these man-made UFOs called ARVs, or alien reproduction vehicles, that eyewitnesses have come forward who have worked on and have seen them in flight. And we literally have the ability to take ET home, and that's a quote from the head of Skunkworks.
I mean, it's very interesting, because one of the things we have a problem with today in the whole UFO area is the fact that it's hard for people to separate what is from extraterrestrials or other dimensionals versus what our military is actually creating and trying to pawn off on that. Were you able to, with your relationship with Dr. Greer and your research, kind of figure out when things are more alien versus more, American, for the lack of a better word?
How about human?
Or human. That would be good.
Well, Dr. Greer says that the major differences are the fact that the interstellar ships are almost biological entities themselves. And they're seamless. Whereas the the reproduction vehicles have seen.
Yeah. You talk about the notion of meditative contact. So you're talking about basically ships designed for and used by extraterrestrials as almost a component of the biological entity themselves. That it's almost powered by the organism itself.
Correct. There's a symbiotic relationship between the passengers and the ship themselves.
That's right.
And,
right.
And because Dr. Greer is pretty much at the forefront of the CE5 type of contact, have you experienced CE5s with him, and do you continue to do things like that today?
Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. Yeah, I actually went with him for a week in Juno Beach, Florida, and they had some amazing sightings of two ships that actually rose out of the ocean, and pretty amazing stuff.
And were you getting an interaction with them? Like, I know that he uses sometimes lasers or lights to, kind of like a response.
He did use lasers to indicate that we were there, and he didn't get a direct response from that. But it was pretty fascinating. I mean, obviously they were communicating with us just by showing up. And after a few minutes, the jet fighter showed up and
that scared him away.
Disappeared again.
That's usually what happens. I've got some video that I'm going to be presenting for the first time ever. I actually took over the New Jersey shore, and I saw an odd object. I started videotaping it actually at my aunt's house, and the next thing you know, we heard the jets coming. It disappeared. Jets flew by, about 7 of them, and they came back. And then as soon as you heard them circle around again, it disappeared again. Pretty fascinating type of interaction that you're seeing there. And that, for me, is a telltale sign that what you're dealing with is not a drone as much as it's actually an intelligent life form. Why they were at the Jersey Shore, I could not tell you. But it's a pretty fascinating thing to see.
Yeah, that's a very true observation.
Now, when you're in relationship to Undisclosed, and I don't want to give anything away, I'm not a spoiler type of guy at all. Growing up, we had the Star Wars, and one person tried to disclose it, and that resulted in a bad thing for him, all the information. But getting back to some of the characters, is you mentioned remote viewing, and in one of the characters that we have in the book. And did you ever try to, or have you ever met anybody that was a remote viewer? And also, did you ever try it?
Well, part of CE5 is using remote viewing to vector in the position of the group to any passing UFOs. So that entire week we were using it. And I'm not sure how effective a remote viewer I am, but Dr. Greer certainly is.
Well, I asked that because we have a group in New York. It's run by a gentleman named Paul Greco. It's called the UFO Roundtable, and we have conducted a couple of CE5s using Dr. Greer's audio for them to go into a meditative type of state. I use something else. When I was there, I use binaural beats and just to get into a spot. And I actually can do some of that remote viewing, and I was telling people the first time that it's going to be above my head, and they took pictures, and we had some objects there. And the second time, I was able to, it's almost as if you can see that you're in the craft where you're going. But we did have an experience where I told them it's out there, and I pointed towards, I was north of one of the bridges. And when I pointed out there, I had a green laser, and I kind of circled the area. And as soon as I did that, we had a burst of light, and it went down. And I was just thankful that I wasn't the only one that saw it and witnessed it. So it must be an exciting experience just to hang out with Dr. Greer at this point, adding to more and more books coming up, I'm sure.
Well, of course, I had the experience with my wife before we met the Greers, but during the CE5 week in Vero Beach, he had rented out a beach house, and most of the people, there were about 25 people there, about 5 or 6 of us stayed in the house with him, and for some reason the windows didn't have any window treatment, so he had brought sheets of aluminum foil, not the stuff that you cook with, but these sheets that were more sheer that were taped over the windows so it wouldn't wake us up in the morning. Well, about 4 in the morning, we finally got to bed on I think the second or third night, and I was just sort of laying in bed, and I'm looking out the window, and I noticed that there's something watching me from the other side of the foil.
That's always nice to see.
It's like this giant praying mantis head, and he's just kind of looking at me, and I'm kind of looking at him. And of course, Dr. Greer had emphasized that these interstellar species are very friendly, and they're here for us, and they're checking us out. And sure enough, he was checking me out. And as I watched, there was sort of an insect, sort of like a spider, that a shadow started crawling up the wall. And, I decided that at that point, I think I'll turn the TV on and end this little session. But the next day I asked Dr. Greer about it, and he said that, yes, there's definitely a very friendly species toward humans that evolved out of insects that has the praying mantis head, and he was no doubt checking me out. Well, perhaps things to come in years later with these 2 books.
Well, given the fact that you are an author, how is this going to play out down the line? I already can probably envision a couple of books coming out.
Well, actually, you used that scene, the hero experiences that scene in Undisclosed.
Yeah, I don't.
That actually did play to that.
But I mean, all these events that all this research you've done, and this, it's kind of mind blowing. Even if you're into sci-fi and the potential that we have, and we're those flying cars we all talked about, it's when you actually see these creatures in front of you that there's no, you kind of like have to stop and like, am I actually seeing a praying mantis? Something in front of me, and when you get that recognition, it's almost like an epiphany. I quote, a religious experience for some people, I guess.
Well, it definitely helps that you're prepared to understand that these beings are, first of all, they're more advanced than us, and second, that why wouldn't they be friendly? I mean, why? We're sort of raised to believe in things like Independence Day and that extraterrestrials are bad, but the truth of the matter is that in the terms of the type of civilizations that are out there, there's 3 types of civilizations. There's a Type 1, there's a Type 2, and a Type 3, the most advanced, and that's what these interstellars are. They're the most advanced species, so of course they're going to have evolved to become, to evolve beyond the things that we go through every day, which, it's sort of pathetic that, our president seems to be a divider, not a uniter.
Right.
And we are a Type 0 civilization, which is the most dangerous type of civilization to be. We're still hooked on fossil fuels. We refuse to let them go for monetary reasons, which is ridiculous.
Right.
It's jeopardizing our world with climate change and global warming. And we have not evolved to the point that we can move on to better things.
And going back to the book, and there's a lot of talk about false flags throughout history. What part of the Project Bloombeam and using aliens and that in that negative context do you think is what part of that false flag do you think is going to happen soon, or I mean, a lot of stuff is kind of gelling from point A to point B. It's kind of following a footstep. Do you see false flags coming up in the near future with that Bloombeam technology?
Well, Dr. Greer certainly is concerned about it, and that was one of the major through lines of both Unacknowledged and Undisclosed, that Unacknowledged being his nonfiction testimonial book. But the false flag being conducted by the military-industrial complex for no other reasons than to maintain control and to take over control by staging an event that looks like Independence Day, for a lack of a better description.
Right.
Whereas we're being attacked by aliens, and when in fact it's the military using these advanced ARVs, these alien production vehicles, and biologicals that they've created in the lab.
Yeah. Now going.
So it's kind of crazy, but it's sick.
Yeah,
right.
Very.
Going on that train of thought, though, Steve, is it possible that part of the propaganda machine is putting out these movies from the 40s and 50s to make us fearful of little green men? Because that's really part of our culture now. You think that if a UFO shows up, it's going to be to do something horrible to you. That's the way we believe now. That's the way that we think. Is there a concerted effort to make Americans think that way?
Well, there was a concerted effort back in the 1950s that Majestic 12, this black ops agency that was basically put into effect by President Eisenhower and Nelson Rockefeller. That was one of their strategies to make people believe that, to make people fear UFOs as a method of trying to control the situation. And, of course, back then, we were involved in the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the hydrogen bomb. And so it was a different time period. But I think people who have, millions of people have these experiences seeing these ships and seeing these advanced species. And I don't think that for those who have legitimately experienced it, like my wife and I have, that there's a fear factor. I think they're just so majestic and so advanced that I think most people would understand that they're not to be feared. But of course, if we're being attacked by something that is flying beyond light speed and using these scalar weapons and blowing up our cities, we're not going to take time and say, gee, is that the military doing that?
Right.
Right.
We're just going to be. It's sort of like 9/11, which I wrote a book about way back in 2008 that dealt with that false flag event.
Is that the shell game? I believe it was.
The shell game, correct.
Yes.
Yeah, but aren't we being set up though? That was a good point that you brought up about 9/11. I mean, we go look at the Muslims as the other to fear, and then with the Mexicans we have to put up a wall. It's going to escalate until we run out of nationalities, and so I mean, I think the next logical conclusion is to fear what is beyond. So. What I'm urging any intelligence that might be out there listening to Inside the Goblin Universe, please wait another 3 years before you come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
you were talking to your own audience here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm hoping there's something.
The way that you stop a false flag from happening is to expose it before it happens.
100%.
And that was one of the major purposes of these two books, Unacknowledged and Undisclosed. That by putting it out there and getting the mainstream public to read it, then it can't work because there'll be too much doubt. It's sort of like coming out in August of 2001 with, actually it did happen with, the presidential briefing, but of course nobody knew about it back then. But if there was a book that had come out detailing the Twin Towers being taken down, a year earlier, then that would have never happened.
Well,
that's right.
There actually, I don't know the author's name or what book it was, but there was a scene in one of the books, and it may be Tom Clancy's novel, one of his novels, where someone flies into the Pentagon. They do attack the Pentagon that way, and I think at one point, the good old Donald Rumsfeld was. I think they've discussed that a couple of times as a false flag. Some things were uncovered, but you also have to understand that what you do, that there's timing for everything, and I don't think Dr. Greer's information and your book, that companion piece, would have worked 10 years ago. It wouldn't. It would seem like what everybody says about everything. Oh, that's Photoshop or that's CGI. It wouldn't get the reception that it is. I think we're all, and they use the term resonating or vibrating at a higher frequency now. We're questioning things. We're questioning the powers that be. So I think that's where your book just hits a grand slam, and then it's followed up by Dr. Greer's information and book that hits another grand slam. I mean, if you can't, go out and see Undisclosed as well as the movie.
Right, but Steve, getting back to the book though, Undisclosed, one of the points that I want to make without giving much away is that this is not truly an extraterrestrial book. This is a book about the human race and the human condition, isn't it? These aliens aren't some sort of messianic figure coming here to set things right. The power is still in our hands as human beings. It's just if we're going to choose to live the right way or if we're to go down the wrong path.
Correct. I mean, extraterrestrials really don't play a big role in Undisclosed. It's, the hero of the story is the new Undersecretary of Defense, who is being tasked to bring out zero-point energy, which is a free, clean, and abundant energy that should have taken over for the fossil fuel industry back in the 1950s, but it wasn't allowed to. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like the electric car. What happened with the electric car? The auto industry, but more important, the fossil fuel industry derailed the electric car. Mm-hmm. And so right. The fossil fuel industry derailed zero-point energy, or continues to keep it bottled up. And the point of the book is to make people aware that we have the ability to provide our species with free, clean energy.
That's right. Yeah, whenever I was reading these government exchanges within your book, I keep on thinking back to that great meeting between Nikola Tesla and J.P. Morgan. Oh, yeah. Whenever Morgan says, I'm going to finance you there, son, but how are we going to make money off of this? And Tesla, you can imagine him, leaning forward and saying, this is for the people. This is for the betterment of mankind. And then Tesla or Morgan withdraws his checkbook and goes over there to Einstein or Edison, who has no problem taking the money. And people like Tesla, a lot of folks have speculated that he might have been getting information from another source as well. Do you think that's possible too, Steve? Do you think that some of these great minds throughout history may have been contacted or had some sort of maybe peek into the other side?
Well, I suppose it's possible, but it's also just possible that Tesla, like other scientists who followed him, T. Townsend Brown, and basically discovered what is already there, which is, that the zero-point energy field does exist, and that if you know how to tap into it, not only do you get free energy, but you also, by adding an electrical charge to it, create an anti-gravitic effect, mm-hmm. where an object loses all its mass and therefore is not bound by any speed limits of the speed of light.
Yeah, that spooky magic that Einstein called it.
Yes, and Tesla effect was, there's rumors to it, Coral Castle down in Florida. They never actually saw him create and move the giant blocks of coral, but through Teslan type of technology, he may have been able to create that energy field where you get the anti-gravity type of field around a set object, and you could just, a baby can do it. A baby could push a 30-ton block. So, and
there's been other inventors that have followed in their footsteps. Like I said, T. Townsend Brown. The
the Meyer brothers, Stan Meyer and his brother Steve, were able to come up with basically allow a car to run on hydrogen and oxygen.
That didn't work out well for them, did it?
No, the CIA basically killed them.
Yes.
And that's unfortunately, this is scary stuff. The powers that be don't like people being challenging their source of income.
That's right. Their authority. That's right. And you had also mentioned in the book the plausibility of there being a cure for nearly every disease, and I do. I've always believed that. I'm a firm believer in the theory that this Earth of ours is a living organism. It reacts to what we do and what we don't do. And I firmly believe that everything that ails us is there's a cure for it somewhere out there if we haven't already plowed it over or destroyed it or what have you. And it ties into your book because you do mention about the South American rainforest being the lungs of the earth, and how the oceans are its kidneys and everything, which is really great, strong thematic elements that you were bringing up here. But we are destroying that ourselves, though. And that's what I mean. The extraterrestrials might be able to point these things out, but unless we take it into our own hands, we're not going to stop destroying ourselves.
Well, that's correct.
And you also mentioned the idea of a God essence in your book as well, which I really found quite startling. Could you elaborate on that just for a little bit about the idea of the God essence?
Well, yeah, I can, but you have to take it within the context. This is something that Dr. Greer experienced when he had a near-death experience as a teenager. He actually had a wound that went septic, and he actually died, and his soul, moved on, and he had an experience that is retold in the book, and I felt that it was very important because it gave him clues as to how advanced species communicate. That because the quandary that we have is that we think like humans, we think like zero type civilizations. How can a species that's maybe 1,000 light years away, first of all, survive the trip? Well, the answer is because they don't move with propulsion engines. And the other quandary is, how do they communicate with each other over vast distances? And the answer to that was arrived by Dr. Greer because of this near-death experience, that they communicate through thought energy. And that's how he was being communicated with in his near-death experience.
And with that thought energy, it does play a big role in what would be paranormal and things that people encounter besides UFOs and cryptids. A lot of times people are saying that your thought, what you think, you produce. So you're going to produce, if you're thinking of, let's say, a Sasquatch or whatever, you actually create that through your thought process. And that has the same kind of play. We can communicate through. There's plenty of documentation of people, mother and children, and father and child, communicating without even speaking a word. They just know exactly what they're going on. So it's a fascinating look into us exposing ourselves or opening our minds to the possibilities that, look, we have the power to do this and change this and make this world a better place.
Mm. Well, even the idea of prayer, isn't that a thought process, correct? You're trying to link up with a higher power and somehow effect some sort of change in the world around you. So, even, all religions around the world, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Catholic, a Hindu, there have been scientific studies done, CAT scans done on the brain where there is a physiological change in the brain of somebody that's in deep prayer or in deep thought. That is what, the world religions are all about, trying to connect to the divine.
Well, there's spirituality and there's religion, and spirituality is the common thread that runs through all of us. You know, the love of a creator, the fact that we are, I guess we're all stardust and we're all connected through our souls, and then you have religion, which basically sort of screws the whole thing up by making it competitive.
Yeah,
my God is better than your God, and my religion
Yes.
is better than your religion. And once you inject ego into the fact, then you just tarnish everything.
That's
Yes,
right. That's right.
You bring warships in and you surround North Korea. That's basically it.
Yeah, it's been said that religion is the enemy of God, and I think that is absolutely the truth, because religion indicates that you have to have a hierarchy, and the person up on top does not want to be usurped by anybody, so they'll make rules and dogmas and things of that nature. But the understanding of the simple idea of a child that goes out into the world and looks with awe at a sunset or a rainbow, I think that's getting closer to the heart of the divine than anything, I truly have always believed that.
Well, the biggest hypocrisy is killing in the name of God.
Yes.
Why would God want you to kill one of his children?
One of his creations, that's right.
Yeah,
And why would he play favorite?
Yes. Unfortunately, many people have experienced that loss in the name of God. I happen to be one of them. One of my best friends on the planet we grew up with happened to be killed in the name of God in the London bombing. So it touches many people's lives, and I think we got to get back into not the religion, but the spirituality of it, the backbone, the foundation, and I think the world would be a better place. Just connect with something other than your iPhone or your computer.
And that's what Undisclosed is all about, Brian. I mean, that's getting right back full circle now. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here, is looking beyond our selfish human reasons, money and power, and looking for something beyond us.
Yes.
That's correct.
And one of the things I loved about, the book was how it opened up, and the little boy and the pod downstairs, and the ability of everybody to basically have more free time for themselves or work at a pace that's dictated by their own abilities or interests. You go in the young kid goes into a pod, and that's where his tutor is and his teacher, and you get anti-gravity in there, and you can experience the world through a spiritual aspect for the most part. I think you did a beautiful job. What a fantastic way to start off the roller coaster.
That's right.
Well, I thought it was important to create a beast story that took place in the future after the disclosure event, because I wanted the reader to see that this is what's waiting for us if we can get from point A to point B. If we can come out with the free energy, the 0 point energy, if we can accept the fact that, we have these technologies that were basically taken from by reverse engineering these advanced technologies, and so here's where we can get to, but you gotta trust the process. You gotta push the powers that be to relinquish control.
And you have to have faith in humanity as a whole as well, to think that we are not inherently evil creatures, that we do have a reason to go on.
Correct. There's a lot more out there than we suspect.
Right. And that was the other thing. The lot more out there is the aliens that you had referred to, and they actually have more faith in us than we have in ourselves. Well,
they've graduated. They're the grad students who have gone through the experience of school, and we're basically the kindergartners who are still fighting in the schoolyard,
playing in the sandbox and not being nice to each other.
Exactly.
And when and being a parent, you understand. You kind of can see like how that relates, because I'm experiencing it right now when you're trying to explain to your child, like, well, you're doing this kind of wrong. Try to do it this way, and it's just a fight back, and eventually, hopefully we pray that they see the light, and I'm hoping sooner than later that we actually see the light and we get to that moment in Undisclosed where we know what the possibility is, and we like that more than what's current, so we do something about it.
Well, we're all going to see the light one day. You know, the object is to, before we get to that point, to figure things out.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what, Mr. Earl, we don't have a lot of time left, but I do really thank you for stepping on Inside the Goblin Universe with us. In this radio show, we try to talk about things related to, the world around us. You know, we sometimes go far afield, but for the most part, we're dealing with, the human reaction and interaction with the unexplained or supernatural. And I truly appreciate you coming in and sharing some of your stories and also sharing Undisclosed with us. And I also want to point out to you that I have always compared you in my mind to Michael Crichton. I was a literature major in college. I went to Pitt. You went to Penn State. And I'm not sure where that's another show in and of itself to figure out why you didn't go to Pitt. But as a literature major, I always thought that you and Michael Crichton were right up there. You were able to entertain and you were able to educate. And I think that after Michael Crichton unfortunately passed away, my friend, you are now the heir apparent to this particular genre. And I'm looking for a lot more from you, my friend. I thoroughly enjoy everything that you write. And I hope you're a success at everything that you do. I hope that this works out well for you. And I hope I see this on the big screen. And I know The Lock has been out there talked about, being in pre-production for a while. I really hope I see that on screen as well, because I think that you raise a lot of really cool zoological point of views in that particular novel.
Well, first of all, thank you for comparing me to Michael Crichton. I was a big fan of Michael Crichton's. I think the one thing that separates our belief systems is that he didn't believe in global warming and I do. And that's an important difference, because I think there's an ignorance for people who don't believe that climate change is actually happening. But as far as The Lock, it's interesting because I had never listened to audiobooks before, but all my books were recently optioned by Blackstone Audio, and they sent me copies to listen to in the car. And the first selection that I chose was The Lock. And I loved listening to the audiobook, not because I wrote it, but because it just took the entertainment to a different level. So if you ever have a chance to listen to The Lock or some of my other books on audio tape, they really did a nice job.
Yeah. My first time to Inverness was in 99. My brother and I went over there. I was still in graduate school at the time. So I went over there, and you had talked at length in that book about the little courthouse, little civic thing that's really is fashioned after a medieval castle. It was actually built in the 1950s. And I'll tell you what, I go back, I have a longing for Scotland. I truly have a soft spot in my heart for that. But I go back to that section of The Lock whenever you talk about that, and that makes me completely relive my time that I was up there. So, for anybody that, is really kind of curious about, Steve Alten, although I'm sure that everybody who's listening tonight has heard about you, but if, about picking up a book, I can tell you without a doubt, pick up any one, you'll be thoroughly entertained, and you'll come back with a bit of an education as well too.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, I hope you're able to fight that cold, my friend. I just got my voice back about 24 hours ago. I spoke at the Mothman Festival down in West Virginia 2 Sundays ago, and I just got my voice back. So everything's working out well tonight. But you said you were a little bit under the weather, so I suggest maybe some tea and honey and a good night's sleep.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my voice has been cutting in and out, but so I do apologize. But thanks for bearing with me. And I will be at the. I found out that I will be at the Seattle Comic-Con in March. There's a big Meg announcement there.
Oh, that's going to be great. Everybody can come out. Will that be on your website, stevealten.com?
Once things get finalized. Yeah.
No problem with that, though.
Yeah. Any more appearances? Any other appearances on the East Coast or any place, my friend?
Because of the Parkinson's, I don't get around as much as I used to. But nothing coming up. I think Seattle will probably be the first thing in March.
Okay. We'll keep our eyes open.
We are working on some things with Sharkman.
Would that be for TV?
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. So I'm hoping that we'll have some kind of announcement in the coming months, and then sometime around Christmas, I hope to finally see the first Meg trailer.
Oh, nice!
Oh, that's gonna be sweet. My kids will never go in the ocean again.
But March is when most of the things are really going to kick in.
And do you have anything you think Undisclosed will be coming out, kind of like Dr. Greer's Unacknowledged, and maybe as another movie option, or maybe you bring in it yourself after the success?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I've had some interest, but nothing official yet, and we'll see. I think what happens is when Meg takes off in the movies, that's when all of my projects will get looked at. The Lock and Sharkman have already been optioned. Neither has gone into production yet, but
that's that
crossed on both of them.
That explosion that will just ripple through, and we'll just start seeing some amazing movies with amazing characters, amazing storyline. We can't thank you enough for being here. We really do appreciate it, and that's not only as show hosts, but as fans of yours. It's a real pleasure to come out and show everybody in the Goblin Universe and even us how wonderful you are as a person as well as an author. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll keep you in my prayers, my friend.
Yes, right here too. Yep.
Thanks, guys. Let's do it again.
Anytime. You're now a member of the Goblin Universe, so you got the free key. You'll be getting it in the mail soon.
Yeah, but all right, folks. I hate to go. I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to have to sign off. To all of our little goblins out there listening, my name is Ronald Murphy.
I'm Bryan Bowden.
Hey, and thanks for listening to Steve Alten with us inside the Goblin Universe. Until next time, have a good day.
On Vampires, the latest book from Ronald Murphy. Join cryptozoologist and folklorist Ronald Murphy as he journeys through history in his quest to uncover the impetus for the archetype of the vampire. Begin at the lair of cannibals and travel throughout the dawn of history, exploring images and involving ideas of the vampire. Trace these concepts all the way to the information age. Keep a stake close by. You're going to need it. On Vampires is now available at Amazon.com.